You're standing over a 7-iron. The ball sits there, waiting. You make the same swing you made 20 years ago, and the ball climbs about waist high, drifts right, and drops 30 yards short of where it used to land. You blame your age. You blame your back. You blame the fact that you just don't have it anymore. But I'm going to tell you something I spent weeks trying to prove wrong, and couldn't. It wasn't your swing that quit on you. It was the clubs in your bag. Most irons sold today are built for a body that can swing 100 miles an hour, and nobody ever told you that the very shape of your irons is stealing distance and confidence from you on every single shot. I found that out by accident. I was cleaning out my late uncle's garage last spring, and I found an old set of irons wrapped in an oil rag next to a handwritten note about a man named Karsten Solheim. That note sent me down a rabbit hole through patent records, old golf catalogs, and a fitting study I never expected to read. By the end of this, I'll show you the 5 irons I'd hand to any older golfer today, and exactly why each one works. But the real prize is at the very end, a single fitting secret, traced back to a garage workshop in 1959, that the big golf companies would rather you never think about. And before you tell yourself this only helps people who still swing hard, let me be clear. What I found helps the golfer who feels weaker this year than last year the most of all. That's the whole point. Let me back up and tell you how this started, because I didn't set out to investigate golf clubs at all. That note in my uncle's garage had one line underlined twice. It said, "The club should forgive the man." I had no idea what that meant. My uncle played golf into his 80s, and right up to the end he was still shooting scores that embarrassed men half his age. I always assumed he was just gifted. But those old irons in the oil rag didn't look special. They looked chunky. The back of each iron was hollowed out, scooped like a spoon, with the weight pushed way out to the edges. I took them to a fellow at my local shop, an older man who has been building and repairing clubs for close to 40 years. He picked one up, turned it over, and got quiet. Then he said, "Whoever gave your uncle these knew exactly what they were doing." And that's when he told me about perimeter weighting and the man who invented it, and why almost nothing sold in the big glossy stores follows the rule my uncle lived by. So here's the first clue I want to hand you, because it changes how you look at every iron in your bag. For decades, the best players in the world used what are called blades. A blade is a beautiful thing to look at. Thin, clean, a solid slab of metal behind a small face. And a blade punishes you without mercy. Miss the center by a 1/4 inch and the club twists in your hands, the ball dies, and the shot goes nowhere. Blades reward one thing only, a fast, pure, repeatable strike. The kind of strike most of us had at 30 and simply do not have at 65. Then in 1959, in a garage in California, an engineer named Karsten Solheim started tinkering. He worked for General Electric. He wasn't even a good golfer. He was frustrated, the way you're frustrated, standing over a putt that wouldn't behave. So he did what an engineer does. He took the weight out of the center of the club and moved it to the outside edges, the perimeter. And when he did that, something remarkable happened. The club stopped twisting on off-center hits. A shot struck near the toe or near the heel still flew almost as far and almost as straight as a perfect one. He called his first putter the ping because of the sound it made at impact. That was around 1959. By 1961, and into the years after, he was applying the same idea to irons, hollowing out the back and pushing the mass to the edges. The golf establishment laughed at him. The clubs looked wrong. Too clunky, too ugly, not what a real golfer would carry. But the forgiveness was undeniable, and by the early 1980s, his Ping I-2 irons were in bags all over the world. That's the whole secret behind my uncle's oily old irons. They forgave him. As his swing slowed and his strike wandered, the club quietly covered for him. He never had to be perfect, so he never lost his confidence, so he kept playing well into his 80s. Now here's the part that made my jaw tighten. That technology exists in abundance today. It is better than ever. And yet the marketing, the magazine covers, the shiny displays at the front of the store, they still glorify the thin, hard, unforgiving look because it photographs like a trophy and it sells to a golfer's ego. So millions of older men and women walk in, get talked into something that looks impressive, and walk out with a club that fights them on every swing. But forgiveness was only the first thing I uncovered, because once I understood why the shape mattered, a bigger question hit me, and it's the one that unravels everything. If the head shape was solved back in the 1960s, why do so many seniors still lose distance year after year? The club shape wasn't the whole story. Something else was hiding in the shaft, and it took me another 2 weeks to find it. Let me show you the first iron I'd put in your hands, because it's the purest, most honest example of everything Karsten Solheim figured out in that garage. The Cleveland Launcher XL. When I picked one up, it felt almost too light in the head at first, and then I hit it, and I understood. The face is large. The sole, the bottom of the club that slides along the ground, is wide. That wide sole matters more than you'd think, and here's why. When your swing slows down, you tend to catch the ground a hair early, what golfers call hitting it fat. A thin, narrow sole digs into the turf and stops dead, and the shot dribbles forward. A wide sole bounces and glides across the ground instead of digging, so even a slightly heavy strike keeps moving through the ball. They also build a weight into the very end of the grip, in the butt of the club. That sounds like a small thing. It isn't. That counterweight helps you feel where the club head is during the swing, which for an older golfer with a slower tempo makes the timing far easier. The result is a club that launches the ball high, holds it in the air, and lands it soft. And here is the number that matters for you. High launch is not a luxury for a senior golfer. It is survival. When your swing speed drops, the ball comes off the face with less spin and less lift. If the club can't get that ball up in the air, it simply won't carry any distance no matter how well you hit it. A high-launching iron like this one is doing part of the work your younger swing used to do for free. So that solves the first piece. Get the ball up, get it forgiving, get it gliding over the turf instead of digging. Good. But it opened the very question that had been nagging me. Getting the ball airborne is one thing. Getting distance back is another thing entirely. And distance, I learned, doesn't live in the club head at all. It lives somewhere almost nobody looks. So I kept pulling the thread. That thread led me to a shelf of old golf equipment manuals and a set of numbers about shaft weight that genuinely stopped me cold. Here's what I dug up. For most of the 20th century, irons came with steel shafts, and a standard steel iron shaft weighs somewhere around 120 grams. That was the default. That's what everyone played. Now, 120 grams doesn't sound like much when you say it out loud, but you swing that weight through the air tens of thousands of times a season, and every gram you have to move costs you speed if your body can't supply the force anymore. Then graphite shafts came along, and a good lightweight graphite iron shaft can weigh as little as 50 to 60 grams. Do the arithmetic on that. You have cut the weight of the shaft in half. And when you cut that weight, a slower swing suddenly accelerates faster because there is simply less mass to drag through the hitting zone. More speed at impact means more distance, and it costs you nothing but the willingness to switch. Here's the part that made me angry on your behalf. For decades, graphite shafts were quietly marked as the beginner's option, or worse, the option for people who had, quote, lost it. There was a stubborn pride in the game that said a real golfer swings steel, and so generation after generation of aging players kept dragging around heavy steel shafts, bleeding speed and distance, believing the loss was their body failing when a huge chunk of it was the shaft in their hands. Which brings me to the second iron I'd hand you, the Callaway Big Bertha. The name has been around since 1991, and there's a reason it's survived this long. This is a club built around exactly the principle I just described. Light graphite shaft as the standard, not the afterthought. A head engineered to launch high and forgive the miss. Callaway builds a rounded internal structure behind the face that lets the whole face flex and spring at impact, so even a slower swing gets a trampoline effect off the club. For a golfer who feels they've lost 15 or 20 yards over the last few seasons, this is the club I'd point to first, because it attacks the loss from both directions at once, lighter to swing and springier at contact. So now we've got two pieces of the puzzle: forgiving heads, light shafts. The distance is starting to come back, but there was still something I couldn't explain, and it's the thing that finally led me toward the real secret at the end of all this. Because when I looked at the actual clubs being sold to seniors, I noticed the numbers stamped on the bottom had been quietly changed. The loft on a modern 7-iron is not the loft your father's 7-iron had. And that one hidden change explains a strange trap that's been catching older golfers for years. Let me show you what I mean. Pull an old 7-iron out of a set from the 1970s and lay the face flat against a wall. The angle of that face, the loft, was around 38 degrees. Now take a brand new 7-iron off the shelf today, and a lot of them measure closer to 28 or 29 degrees. That's nearly 10 degrees of loft that simply vanished, and yet both clubs have the same number stamped on the sole, the same 7. Why would they do that? Here's the game. A club with less loft, all else being equal, sends the ball farther. So a manufacturer strengthens the loft, stamps a 7 on it, and now their 7-iron flies farther than the competitor's 7-iron in the store. The customer hits it, sees more distance, and thinks, "This club made me longer." It's a distance illusion, and it has been creeping into iron design for years. But for an older golfer, this quiet trick is a trap, and here's the cruel part. Remember what I told you. When your swing slows down, you need more loft to get the ball in the air, not less. And the industry has been marching in the exact opposite direction, taking loft away to win a numbers game on the store shelf. So you buy a modern iron with a strengthened loft, and now you can't launch it, and the ball comes out low and dies, and you blame yourself all over again. You feel it standing there, watching that low ball die short, doing the same swing you've always trusted, and wondering why the club is lying to you about the number stamped on its own sole. That gnawing feeling, that the equipment was rigged against you and nobody explained it, is exactly what the complete senior distance system was built to end for good. It's the only 3-volume equipment playbook made just for senior golfers, and it lays out the whole loft-jacking scandal in plain language, shows you the 5 forgiving irons that actually deliver, honestly ranked, and walks you through the biology of why you lost 15 to 30 yards after 55, plus the shaft truth most fitters never say out loud. Here's a check you can run tonight, for free, that proves this to yourself. Pull your own 7-iron out of the bag, lay the face flat against a door frame, and eyeball how upright it stands compared to a wedge. You'll start to see with your own eyes how loft and lie were quietly changed on you. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description, or the pinned comment. And this isn't about a sale or a deadline, it's about the yards you're already losing on every single round until your equipment finally matches your body. Now stay with me, because before you spend a dime on anything, I'm about to show you 2 free fixes with the clubs already leaning in your garage right now. This is where I want to stop and talk directly to you, if you're sitting there thinking this whole thing is for people who still play 3 times a week and can practice. Maybe you've got a set of irons you've owned for 20 years and no intention of spending a fortune on new ones. Maybe you play a handful of times a summer and your knees remind you of it for 2 days after. I thought about you the entire time I was digging through this, because the next thing I found doesn't cost a penny and works with the clubs already leaning in your garage right now. Here it is. Take the irons you already own and check 2 things you have probably never checked in your life. First, the loft situation you cannot fix on old clubs easily, but you can work around it, and I'll tell you how in a moment. Second, and this one is free and immediate, grip the club down. Choke down on the handle by about an inch. When you hold the club shorter, you gain control, you strike the center of the face far more often, and center strikes fly farther and straighter than off-center strikes every single time. That one adjustment, gripping down an inch, is the single fastest way to recover consistency with the irons you already own, and it costs nothing. Now, that workaround for loft. If your old irons are too strong to launch, the fix is not to muscle them. The fix is to take one more club than you think you need. If the distance calls for a 7-iron and you can't get it airborne, hit the 6 with an easier, smoother swing, and let the club do the work. A relaxed swing with more club launches higher and flies more consistently than a hard swing with too little club. Older golfers lose distance mostly by trying to swing harder to make up for it, which tightens everything and slows the club down. Smooth and one club longer. Write that on a card and tape it in your bag. And here is the part meant just for you, the golfer who isn't buying anything today. Clean the grooves on your irons. Take an old toothbrush and some warm soapy water and scrub the little grooves on the face until they're clean and sharp again. Those grooves grip the ball and create spin, and spin is what makes the ball climb and stop. A set of dirty, packed grooves is quietly costing you height and control on every shot, and 10 minutes at the kitchen sink gives it back for free. That is the timeless kind of fix my uncle would have done without a second thought, back when you took care of what you owned instead of replacing it. So we've fixed what you already have. But if you are ready to put a new tool in your hands, the trail I was following pointed at 3 more irons, and each one solves a specific problem the last one didn't. The third iron I'd hand you is the Ping G series, the direct descendant of everything Karsten Solheim started in that garage. This is the family tree of perimeter weighting, 60 years of refinement in one club. What Ping does that I want you to understand is something called forgiveness through stability. They engineer the club so it resists twisting on off-center hits, more than almost anything else on the market. There's a real number behind this. Engineers measure a club's resistance to twisting, and Ping has spent decades pushing that number as high as physically possible in an iron. Why does that matter for you specifically? Because as we age, the exact center of the face becomes a smaller and smaller target. Our strikes scatter. A club that treats a toe hit or a heel hit almost like a center hit is a club that keeps your good scores and erases your disasters. You'll still make a bad swing now and then. Everybody does. The Ping simply refuses to punish you as harshly for it. That's the whole promise, and it traces in a straight, unbroken line back to that underlined note in my uncle's garage. The club should forgive the man. But forgiveness and launch and light shafts still left one type of golfer unserved, and finding that gap is what led me to the 4th iron. Because what about the player whose swing has slowed down the most? The one who isn't losing a few yards but has genuinely soft, slow tempo now, the 80-something who still loves the game. The standard game improvement iron isn't enough for them. They need something more extreme, and the industry barely talks about it. That golfer needs what's called a super game improvement iron, and the one I'd choose is the Cobra Air X, or something built on the same idea. Everything about this club is made lighter and easier. The whole club weighs less. The shaft is lighter still, and they do something clever with the weighting toward the heel that helps square the face at impact, which fights the weak, right-drifting shot that plagues slower swings. The face flexes aggressively to add speed you can no longer generate yourself. Here's the honest truth I want to give you, because nobody in a shiny store ever will. There is no shame in this club, none. The ego in golf tells you that lighter and easier means lesser, that a real player wouldn't carry it. That ego has cost older golfers untold enjoyment and thousands of good rounds. The right club is the one that gets the ball in the air and keeps you playing the game you love. My uncle understood that at 80. The proudest man I ever knew played the most forgiving clubs he could find, and he outscored everyone. So now I had 4 irons, and I thought I had the whole story. Forgiving heads, light shafts, high launch, easy swinging designs, but there was 1 iron left, and it turned out to be the bridge to the real secret, the thing that finally cracked this whole investigation open. The 5th iron isn't really a single iron at all. It's an idea called combo sets, and the leading example is something like the tailor-made Stealth, or a mix set built the same way. Here's the idea, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The long irons, the 4 and 5 iron, are the hardest clubs in the bag for anyone to hit, and for a senior, they are nearly impossible. They have the least loft and the longest shaft, which is exactly the worst combination for a slower swing. So a combo set replaces those brutal long irons with what are called hybrids, rounded, wood-like clubs that launch the ball high and easy, and only gives you the shorter, more forgiving irons for the scoring clubs. The moment I understood combo sets, the last piece clicked, because it told me the secret was never about finding one magic iron at all. It was about the fit, the matching, and that is exactly what the man in the garage understood before anyone else, and exactly what I found buried at the bottom of all this research. So let me take you to the end of the trail, to the thing I was really chasing. I mentioned that my uncle's note referenced Karsten Solheim. What I didn't tell you is what I found when I traced his work all the way back. Everyone remembers Solheim for the shape of the club, the perimeter weighting, the forgiveness. But when I read deeper into how he actually built clubs for people in those early years, starting around 1959 and through the 1960s, I found the thing that mattered more than any single design. He built clubs to fit the individual golfer. He was one of the first people to seriously insist that the club had to be matched to the person swinging it. The length, the lie angle, the weight, all of it tailored, instead of the person being forced to adapt to a club pulled off a rack. And here is the specific, buried, almost forgotten piece I want to hand you, the one thing that outweighs every brand name I've mentioned tonight. It's called the lie angle, and it is the single most overlooked measurement in an older golfer's bag. The lie angle is the angle between the shaft and the ground when the club sits properly behind the ball, and here is why it quietly destroys senior golfers. As we age, our swings get shorter and more upright, and many of us stand a little differently than we did at 40. When the lie angle is wrong for your body and your swing, the club sits with its toe or its heel up in the air at impact, and that tilt sends the ball sideways no matter how perfectly you hit it. A club that is too upright pulls your shots left. A club that is too flat pushes them right, and you will stand there swing after swing, adjusting your aim, blaming your hands, blaming your eyes, when the club itself was pointing you the wrong way the entire time. Here's the proof of how much it matters. A change of just 2 degrees in lie angle can move where the ball starts by several yards at a normal iron distance. Several yards from a measurement most golfers have never once had checked, and the fix costs almost nothing. Any decent club shop can bend a forgiving iron a degree or two to match you in a few minutes, or check it for you for the price of a couple of golf balls. Solheim understood this in that garage 60 years ago, that the club must be bent to fit the man, not the other way around. The golf industry buried that truth under a mountain of marketing about the newest face technology, because you cannot photograph a lie angle and put it on a magazine cover, and you cannot sell a whole new set every year on a quiet 2-degree adjustment. So here is your weekend, if you want it. Take any one of the forgiving irons I described, the Cleveland, the Callaway, the Ping, the Cobra, or a combo set, and before you ever obsess over the brand, do the 2 things almost nobody does. Get the lie angle checked against your actual swing, and get a lightweight graphite shaft matched to your tempo. That combination, a forgiving head, a light shaft, and a lie angle bent to fit your body, is the whole secret. It is what my uncle had wrapped in an oil rag. It is why a man in his 80s kept beating men in their 40s. It is the club forgiving the man, exactly like the note said. I went looking for the best iron, and I came back with something better. The best iron in the world is worthless if it doesn't fit you, and the humblest forgiving iron becomes a weapon the moment it does. That's the thing they stopped telling us, and it's the thing I want you to walk away holding tonight. Because here's what this was really about, under all the brand names and the numbers. It was about getting back something that was quietly taken from you, the belief that you could still play, still improve, still stand over a ball and trust what happens next. That was never gone. It was buried under heavy shafts and strong lofts and a pride that told you to swing steel and tough it out. You don't have to accept the story that says the game leaves you behind as you age. That story was written by people selling you the wrong tools. You are the kind of person who would rather understand how something works than be sold a shiny box and told to trust it. So I'll leave you with the question that started all of this, and I genuinely want your answer. When was the last time you had the lie angle on your irons checked? Or did you even know it was a thing you could check? Tell me in the comments, right now, before you forget. And if you're still swinging heavy steel shafts, say so, because I want to know how many of you were carrying that weight without ever being told there was another way. If this pulled back the curtain even a little, stay with me, because this channel exists to recover exactly this kind of buried, practical knowledge, the stuff that convenience culture paved over and hoped we'd forget. We're a group of people digging it back up, one forgotten truth at a time. And next I'm chasing down something that's been bothering me for weeks, The real reason the golf ball you're playing might be costing you more distance than any club in your bag, and the simple test to find out, traced back to a patent almost nobody remembers. Come find out with me. Before you go, let me say one thing. Inside my membership, the Practical Wisdom Circle, I take you all the way to that single fitting secret I couldn't fully cover here. In there, you can ask me your own questions, and a real person answers you, never a machine. You belong with thousands of practical folks already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen and cancel anytime, no risk at all. Now that you've found the right irons, let's help you off the tee. In this next video, I'll show you the drivers that give seniors more distance and straighter shots. It's starting right here.